I'm actually 17, so I'm not old enough to vote yet. But
What would you
similar
be voting
to
for?
yes, so similar to Akia, I really like Kamala Harris, and I think that I'm also the daughter of immigrants, so I see myself in her like Akia. So I'm a supporter of her as well. And if I could vote, they would have my vote.
So there were some really interesting headlines out in the last couple of days about what the president was saying around um, COVID, and particularly to Dr. Fauci, right? He's basically our chief public scientist who's been guiding the public. Do any of you have a reaction to that? He also was quoted as calling them idiots. I'm just curious if that tilted you anymore. And the same with you, Anika, any of you. Did you come across that? What'd you think? Just curious.
So I think knowing that coronavirus has further inundated communities of color specifically, and having access or not having access to these PPE equipments, that also further pushed me in alignment with Joe Biden and some of the policies that he had. Even thinking about the fact that today is actually a night of the last debate that we had for the presidential election, knowing that Trump and several of his cabinet members also had coronavirus, and that was due to the fact that they were they didn't subscribe to what Dr. Fauci had originally requested of us, which is to wear our mask and social distance. Like, that is further putting us in a public crisis itself. So I think with Joe Biden, and knowing that he has a plan for the future, and we probably would not be in the same predicament or the same situation that we were currently in 9 months after coronavirus has allow us to stay home and have these work from home scenarios as well as school from home scenarios, it would have been a little bit different. So I'm definitely leaning more towards Joe Biden after a lot of the stuff that President Trump has said.
Let me just remind our audience that we're talking with three Gen Zers, two of whom are in college, Akia Callum and Jody Bell and Anika Mystery. What are your friends, are you talking about the elections with your friends, Jody?
Oh yeah, me and my roommates literally had a debate night a few days ago. We made popcorn. It's all we can talk about. We all registered to vote together. It's honestly part of our social culture right now.
Yeah, Anika, what about you? Any at the high
Yeah.
school level?
So at a high school level, since a lot of us cannot vote, we still want to be politically engaged. So we're all watching the elections, and our teachers are encouraging it, and we're discussing it in our classes, and we're sharing our thoughts on social media, and we're just trying to follow along because there will be a time in a couple of years when we are old enough to vote. So we want to be engaged.
Anika, you're in California, right?
Yes, I am.
So how have the dynamics there, big fires, COVID, really impacting schools there and stuff, any impact that you're seeing of those big crises on how people like yourself are feeling about the next president?
So I think these crises pushed people to want to take political action because we're seeing how our current president is reacting to the fires here. And we realize that this might not be how we want to fix the solution. So this is kind of reminding, especially the people who can vote, like, I have a voice. This is a democracy. I'm going to use my voice to vote in the way that I believe will help my state and my country.
So let's talk about what advice you would have for the next president. And I'll just keep it general, and then we'll hone in on some of the big issues taking place. So Akia, I don't know if you want to start us off, but what's it like if you were sitting down with the president, what would you be saying to him? It will be a him.
Yeah, so I recently just graduated with my master's in education. So I'm a big education guru and making sure that students have access to education, whether it's from K through 12, but also thinking about college. And I know there's been a lot of popcorn conversation about having college for all and college affordability. And knowing that students like myself graduated with college debt, and knowing that the NAACP, which is an organization that I'm a part of, both on the state and national level, we are definitely focusing on and honing in on college debt and student affordability. So that'll be my main conversation with them, knowing that these are overlapping issues, and that also feeds into our public health crisis as well.
Very interesting. Anika, what would you be saying if you were sitting down with him?
So I want to advocate for equality. I think that what we're seeing with the Black Lives Matter movement right now, and just the actions that are occurring in our country right now, I think that it is time that we address the inequalities in our country and ensure that there is equity for everyone. And especially with like what I've developed in the past with Girls with Impact, I've developed an aid to assist neurodiverse individuals, like even equality with that and giving them opportunities instead of discriminating them. So I think just equality for everyone.
Jody, what about you?
So I'm going to speak very generally right now, but I'm going to say sustainability. And I don't just mean environmentally, I mean economically. I want to make sure that, especially with COVID, we're creating long-term economic solutions. And with equity, I want to make sure that we're addressing the root of our systemic issues, not just, putting short-term fixes on them, and that we're truly creating long-term solutions that will particularly help Gen Z, who will be here when we're facing the repercussions of short-term solutions.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Let's talk about what's your biggest worry about? I mean, I could imagine, Jody, one of your biggest worry is that there's short-term solutions. And, we hear a lot from Gen Z about climate change, global warming, really wanting to tackle that, certainly equal justice, healthcare, really big issue, Akia, as you pointed out, and education. Any big worry that you have about the next president? Jody, you want to kick that off?
Yeah. And, I think I'm going to say something that applies to both nominees right now. I think the repercussions of electing either could be pretty dire on the opposing party. I just think we're at such a political division right now that the turmoil that will be created, however this election goes, could be pretty disastrous, especially given that we're in a pandemic. And I'm pretty afraid of what, that's going to look like.
Yes, it's very scary when you think about the long-term, how we get this economy moving again. And for Gen Zers who are in that transition period of just entering the workforce amid all this. Let's turn to COVID, and that's kind of related to it. Akia, what would you like to see happen related to COVID? How we kind of, your advice to the president-elect on getting us out of this. There's been talk over the last couple of days from some folks out of the current administration about just having an open system and letting folks who get it, with the thinking that most people will survive it okay. What would you like to see happen to kind of get this COVID thing to rest? We'll go to Akia.
I think when we think about the demographics of the people that are primarily affected, oftentimes they leave out children, and these students are now going to schools and being impacted where they're playing, they're doing what kids do, right? So we're having these conversations on what that looks like. I think honestly, either having a universal protocol around what school reopening plans look like, but also having that one-to-one connection, because each state governs a little bit differently. I'm currently in Connecticut, and Connecticut is in phase 3, where the individual jurisdictions within our cities have autonomy over their actual school districts. So I'm in New Haven, so a lot of schools were actually remote. Public schools were remote for a long period of time. They're actually they returned back to school last week, as opposed to where I work in Waterbury, where half of them were doing remote and half of them were doing in person. And we recognize that some of the uptick of students catching coronavirus, or the faculty and staff catching coronavirus, which is now going to further put their households in jeopardy. So I think, honestly, once again, focusing on what the schools look like, because those are hubs, and how the schools are a reflection of the community as well. And I recognize that schools are microcosms of the world. So having that conversation on that one-to-one, like, at the end of the day, students are required to go to school. A lot of people do have kids, whether it's in an apartment building or is in a house, whatever type of complex they live in, housing condition they live in. So making sure the students are safe so the rest of the world could be safe as well.
I'm talking, folks, to 3 Gen Zers: Akia Callum, who is in college in Connecticut, Anika Mistry from California, and Jody Bell, who attends the College of Charleston. Anika, let me just go to you. If you were sitting down with the president, you're giving him advice on equal justice, right? That's something that you feel super passionate about, one of the big issues of the day. What would you be advising the president to kind of bring the country together, create fairness? I mean, we see it with, you know, interest rates to getting jobs to what they're paid. What advice would you have?
So I think that one thing, at least for California, is right now we have Prop 26 going on, and this prop is an affirmative action prop, because right now in California, there is no affirmative action. It's banned for public institutions like the UC system here and government jobs. So I think bringing this back and bringing this to the states that still don't have this is an important action. But the main thing I want to tell our president is, like, take action. It doesn't matter like how small it is, but it's time to take action. And I don't want a president to sit in office for 4 years and not do anything at all to take steps towards creating an equal America, because, you know, it might take more than 4 years, but if you're just sitting there doing nothing, then it's never going to get better. And that's why we and our president needs to take these steps.
And then we'll turn to Jody, and we'll close it out on the economy and jobs. And all of you are just, you know, lending such insight into some of these issues. And really, all of you have your pulse on the ground in different parts of America. So it's just so interesting to get this from you. We're going to have you back. So the economy and jobs, Jody, what would you be telling the president-elect?
Well, I mean, as a college student, I'm terrified, so I have a lot to say. I'm afraid that we are dealing with the economic repercussions of COVID by just kind of funneling money in and holding ourselves afloat for now. But our economic vibrancy is going to take a hit for years, and we have to ensure that people are able to support their own economies and give the people the tools to have long-term solutions that will keep our economy afloat, will keep our workforce afloat, and keep it in the hands of the people to make sure they have the funds necessary to incorporate that economic vibrancy into their communities.
Anything else that you guys would want to kind of pass on to, you know, people who are watching? Vote, right? Any closing comments from you guys? Anybody? Akia?
So I would strongly suggest that you guys verify your status. I know oftentimes people are like, oh, well, I voted in 2016 during a presidential election, but a lot of times they do purge the rolls. So making sure that you have an idea of whether or not you're actually registered. And if you aren't registered in the state of Connecticut, you have until October 27th. And if you are going to be requesting an absentee ballot as well, you have until November 2nd. So make sure that you verify with your state, as well as you're giving polling locations. I know that I'll be going into actually vote. I don't know if I necessarily trust the entire mail by vote process, but that opportunity is available for you to use, so utilize it.
And I think the final comment I'll add to that really good point, Akia, is that if you are walking your ballot in someplace, make sure that it really is an official ballot box, because there's been stories that there have been these fake ballot boxes in California. Really frightening. So you want to make sure that your vote really gets counted. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. Awesome having you. We will see you back very soon. Next week, we have the head of talent of the Omidyar Network. If you don't know what the Omidyar Network is, you maybe have heard of eBay. Pierre Omidyar started eBay, and he also started the Omidyar Network to invest in innovative companies with a bent towards social good. We'll be having their head of talent on next week to talk about hiring, how you hire in this environment, and more. So join us next week, same time, LinkedIn Live at 12 noon. I'm Jennifer Openshaw. Thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.